want to talk about labels. How they help me specifically is what I really want to talk about. Like how I've learned in the past couple of years that certain labels really help me define something and explore something within myself. Mostly in the realm of mental health and other things, or just reflecting on myself as a person. Um, but before I get into that, I feel like I have to acknowledge, or have some responsibility to also acknowledge the fact, and responsibility to me, not responsible to any one person or group or whoever, but I also just like to paint a fuller picture of the label conversation, that there's a lot of negative ways you can use labels. Labels are not inherently good or bad, I don't think, but I think most people, including myself, feel like when we bring that up, like you're labeling a person, or giving them an identity under the umbrella of just like one word, or like a disorder, or whatever it is, their occupation, or their that it's detrimental, and that putting people in boxes is not good. A label in and of itself is a definition with a set of qualities that make it different than something else, than another label, than another word, than another position, title, description, job, you know, um, whatever. So there's reason for those things, like just logistically, there's reasons why we have words, right? Language is an important thing, and how we use it is equally important. I mean, obviously. So I think, again, I've been adverse to labels for like 30 years or so, just because like I really didn't fit in. I didn't feel like a label ever like described me as a person enough. There's nothing you could just give me and just be like, oh yeah, he's that, and that's it. Like one label. Like people are complex and nuanced and very different. Despite the fact that we'll suffer from terminal uniqueness, like I do believe that like it's really difficult to just categorize a person in a short description, of like a label or even one or two labels. Even if you do fit under that label, so does someone else, and they're different than you. And if we want to talk about mental health and disorders and things like that, you could say like, oh, that person's ADHD. Oh, that person is too. Well, what does that mean? First of all, everything outside of the ADHD could be completely different with each person. And within the ADHD, there's differences of severity. There's like ways that they manifest, like different ways that they can control and cope, and like it's just the yeah, that label is somewhat important because it gives an idea of like, okay, I understand. Let's say it's a teacher-student relationship. It's like, okay, now I've got some set of things to look out for. I've got some hyperactivity, maybe some attention issues, and then I can ask, oh, what can I do to help you? And maybe, if I have certain students flagged as that, I could pay more attention to those things with those students. I mean, then you got the problem of like, well, what if there's students who suffer from the same thing but haven't been diagnosed, and we got to keep an eye on everyone, obviously. But labels can help to start a conversation and to get to know someone's specific natures, like specific details that make up them, and put them under that label, and you learn everything else. So they can be helpful in that way. I want to talk about more about labels and me, because like again, labeling people under something and just being like that's who they are, that's their identity. I've never really liked that, because I've always felt way too complex. Even just saying like my musical taste or something, rather simple and not very important in the scheme of things. Like in high school or whatever, I'm like, no, like I listen to this and whatever. Okay, so I first really recognized the labeling thing within myself that had helped me with a label of anxiety, of someone who has anxiety. Again, like a person, if we're talking about mental health or anything, like I am not that disorder, if you wanted to call it that, or whatever that thing is. It's just I have things that, or like if I say I have anxiety, it's not like I am anxiety, even though I feel that way sometimes. I hope that distinction makes sense. It should. So this wasn't an official diagnosis at all. It was just that for some reason it had never clicked to me that my whole life I had had issues with anxiety or whatever, and I don't, some people might take like offense or have some disagreement with the fact that I've never been officially diagnosed by, a physician or whatever. But it's pretty clear to me, looking at what anxiety is and how it can manifest within people and whatever, that it is not something that I just like It's like when people say like, "Oh, I'm depressed." It's like, no, you're having an off day. Like that's not depression. Like depression is like this thing that you can. I mean, it can be diagnosed, but it's also a thing that doesn't have to be necessarily diagnosed. But you can feel like, no, this is a long term thing. This is not just like, oh, I'm depressed today. It's like, no, you're not. Like you just maybe you feel sad or you feel down or you're not very positive or very optimistic today, or you're just having an off day. But it's not depression, capital D. So I feel like I fit into or under this umbrella of anxiety or a person having anxiety to a degree that I don't feel like there's an argument. Looking back at my history, even as a teenager and whatever else, and I started thinking about like all the things that I was doing then to cope with it that I didn't even recognize because I didn't learn that those were coping mechanisms for me until the past couple years, being like, oh, when I did this as a teenager, that was really helping my anxiety, or like it probably would have been a lot worse. I probably would have been a more anxious person. Like I could recognize the anxious behaviors I had then, and also recognize that they were way more minimal than they are now. Probably because a lot of things I was doing then they came natural to me at the time, were coping mechanisms. I wasn't even using them on purpose as a, like, oh, I need to, like, right now for me I know like, hey, biking is really fun, but also I'm very aware that when I go biking, physical exercise, getting sunshine, only focusing on one task, not having the opportunity to multitask in my brain and overanalyze whatever, and like it's just that one thing like that helps my mental health an insane amount. Like it calms me, thus easing anxiety. But as a youth, that was not something that I ever thought of. Like, oh, these activities, like, oh, playing basketball and going for long walks, like, almost every day, listening to music, like, just being by myself and not having this other stimuli and not, whatever. There's a lot of things that I did that were natural and that just, they took care of it. But yeah, a couple of years ago, someone was telling me, like, you have anxiety, like, and I was like, huh. Like it just for some I don't know if anyone else had ever mentioned that word to me or given me that label before then. I just can't recall. But it just clicked and I was like, that's what this is. It's like this overanalyzing, this neurotic behavior, the paranoia sometimes, the sense of doom that I could feel, like and why I was getting those feelings. I was like, that makes perfect sense. And I was like, and then for some reason, just because I realized that that label made sense, I felt like now I have a direction that I can move in, which was just weird. Because beforehand, there's obviously things that I wanted to fix or repair or work on within myself and do better and be a productive, whole being, lifelong learner, etc., buzzwords, that just helps themselves and improves. And there were things that relate to anxiety that I wanted to work on, but for some reason there was just so much of like, this is just who I am. Like this is what I do. Like yes, I'm a neurotic person, or that I behave certain ways, or certain things do this to me, or I'm like, man, I don't like meeting new people unless it's a one-on-one thing and conversation. I don't like being in crowds of people that I have to engage with. Being in crowds is fine. I would never shop on Christmas Eve, but if I had to, and those were like an example of a huge crowd to be in, I don't care because I don't have to talk with those people. But it's just not something that bothers me. But if I have to network with people in a room or go to a gallery and talk with people or like an opening or whatever, I'm like, I don't like that. So there's different types of anxiety, obviously, and that's why I never say like I have general anxiety disorder. Like I'm not giving myself a medical label in that sense, but I'm not someone who just says, yeah, I'm anxious today. Like it's not a today thing. Like this is a thing that I believe is part of my identity. And I don't know, this is maybe a horrible example, but I'm going for it anyway. It's like if someone says they're an alcoholic, but they've been sober for 20 years. I think that there are ways that I obviously can control my anxiety and help myself, and maybe to the point where I don't feel anxious, but I feel like that has been such a part of me for so long as to who I have been, or what things fit under, like, I don't know, just part of my beingness, that I don't know if that'll ever go away, even if I get to a point where I can cope much better and I don't have as many issues with it. I just feel like it's something that will be a part of my identity, and maybe it won't be, but it just feels, because for the majority of my life, it seems like that has applied a lot. So for some reason, giving me that label or just like it clicking and be like, oh my goodness, like I started to work on things. I started to like read some stuff. I started to have conversations with people that I knew and been just talking about it, and they're like, yeah, like you didn't think that you were anxious. You didn't think that you were fitting under that umbrella. I'm like, I don't know. That word never came to me, and I was just able to work on things. Like for some reason, just that just opened up a door of like, oh my goodness, like there's a name for this. I've known what anxiety means, but for some reason, never applied it to myself. Didn't have conversations about it to a point where I felt like, I kind of fit there. Like that just didn't happen, and then it was just yeah, it just opened a door for me to research, reflect, explore, and execute um, strategies that I have been studying in order to ease my anxiety and to be calmer and to cope. And like I said, I'd never been officially diagnosed by a doctor, but I had seen a counselor a little bit after I had applied this label to myself and was working on things. And that was one of the things that I was working on with them was my anxiety. Was like working on that and how can we cope with that. And they were like, they backed up very clearly, like, yes, this is something that you, dare I say, suffer from, or like this is something that applies to you. You are an anxious person. You have anxiety. And I know the diction might bother some people of having something or being something or whatever, but that's just the way that I'm using language today. In a way that I understand it, in a way that I don't feel misrepresents me or what I feel. So that was the first thing, and that's still something that I am working with. Like having that door open, that door's never going to close now. Like I feel like I'm still working with that label. I am still um, feeling myself out as to how I fit with it, how it fits with me, how I can try and work with it and be a better me that's more healthy mentally and physically. The other thing is I want to talk about labels of identity, but also labels of situations kind of last to wrap things up. But that was just like such a big thing, and I couldn't think of anything else other than a little while after that, maybe like a year or so ago, someone introduced me to the term external processor. And that was a little over a year ago, year and a half maybe. And I was like, oh my goodness, like I had never heard that phrase before. And I was like, that's exactly what I do. And part of it is something that I've talked about, on the vlog before and behind the curtain stuff, and why I started even doing this in the first place. I recognized that having conversations with people always really helped me. Like having a conversation helped me not because of the feedback I was getting, although sometimes people had great things to say, and that's one thing I love about having conversations with intelligent people and people that I value in my life, because they will have something to say that will get me thinking. But I found that I never thought I needed a sounding board, but then I realized, like, at some point, like, I love talking, not just because of the feedback I'm getting, but because when I'm able to talk out loud, for some reason, I say things before I have a chance to think or feel them, and I was like, man, I didn't even know I felt that way, but that is exactly how I feel. That is why I feel that way. Like sometimes, and that's why I'm having this conversation right now. Explaining things and talking about things quickly leads to me making new discoveries within myself. And someone just applied that term of external processor to me, they explained it because I'm like, I don't even know what that means. And then I was like, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. This is why, like, when I'm painting, I can figure out my feelings sometimes. I am creating something, I'm expressing something, and through the act of expressing those things, external from myself, that is how I am processing my feelings. Because I can spin my wheels internally, overanalyzing and everything else, and not get anywhere. If I write it down, if I create art with it, if I'm, screaming about it, if I'm, whatever that is an outward, external expression, that is what gets me to understand what it is that I'm talking about, or the subject that I'm, currently feeling internally. It's just sitting there in my feelings, doing nothing with them. Like I just spin my wheels a lot. Like it doesn't do anything really in the long term. Well, it just doesn't do anything really. Like most of the time, like I can't just sit there and think about things and have it work. This is why when I'm having, maybe an argument with a partner, there's a lot of reasons, but one, I don't like being left in limbo or start to panic. That's this thing that I just get really anxious about the relationship, depending on what the fight was about, or disagreement or argument. But yeah, it's a sense of unknowing, of not knowing how the other person is feeling. So giving someone space was very, very hard for me at first, during times of adversity within the relationship. But that's the other thing, is that I can't figure out everything that I feel. I can't figure out how to move on. I don't have the solutions a lot of the time just with me, just held inside. Like, I need to have that conversation and verbalize things and have some back and forth and whatever else, not just to know their side of things, because I can't read minds, but also just to know my side fully. I need to be able to express it. And verbal expression for me and writing are two different things that different forms of expression that both help. One slows you down, like writing just slows me down, so I'm having thoughts quicker than I can write, but that's still helpful. But I've just found, again, why am I having conversations verbally, vlogging, and whatever else? Because it helps me, because I'm speaking, again, faster than I'm really thinking about what I'm saying. I'm just like, it's just flowing. And then sometimes I say things, I'm like, whoa, what? Epiphany. I didn't even know that I felt that way, and it's 100% true. So that's another one, like the external processor label. I was like, yes. And because of that label, again, I was able to not just recognize, oh, that's what I do, cool, and then move on. It helped me understand what I need to do more. It helped me understand, I need to do this and keep doing this, or try to find different ways to do this, because that is where I find my understanding a lot of the time within myself. That is how I process information, whether it's emotional information or whatever. So that is why that label was so incredibly helpful for me. And the last one that I want to talk about in specifics before I get into some other maybe cons or negatives about labels is I just labeled a situation yesterday. Strong triggers distort, and is a conversation that I wanted to have with Randy, with my partner, because of a disagreement that we were having, an argument or a fight or whatever. So it was something that happened the next day. I realized, like, oh, like, I've had some time to think about it, and we've talked about it, and then it just kind of hit me, and it just that phrase, strong triggers distort. And one reason is just like a situation that I'm labeling. We're just giving words to identify what the situation was, to go back to it, just like a shortcut, basically, or an abbreviation of the whole situation. I do that often. I think most people do, just to remind themselves, like, oh, that's what I'm talking about. And so, like, I texted that to her in parentheses, which is my way of knowing it's a message I have to lock. This is way too much detail. A text that I have to lock in my phone, and then I can delete everything else in the conversation, and that will be there, and that's a reminder, oh, we have to talk about this thing later, because it's the first thing I see, because it's the last thing in the thread. So I've been doing that for a long time. I think most people naturally would give labels to a scenario, but again, in just giving it the right words, again, I was able to move further with it. It wasn't like I understood everything about that situation and then I gave it the label. I gave that situation the label, and then we were able to explore it together, and I was also able to just like, I was like, oh, like just in the act of finding the right words, sometimes if it's not a label that's just given to you as like a, oh, ADHD means this label was given to you, but I'm creating a label for a scenario with, 3 words, strong triggers distort, to be candid, I mean, the details of it were just the fact that we have certain triggers within the way we communicate to each other, and when we talk to each other in a certain way, and it triggers the other person, and that person says, or, discusses things in a way that triggers the other person back and forth, or just like one style of communication, put it that way, can trigger the other person, and that person just naturally uses a different style of communication that triggers the other person. It distorts it distorts the relationship. It distorts our feelings in that moment. We almost forget about everything outside of that moment because we are so worked up. And I hate using the word triggered this way. I just couldn't think of anything else. But like, it just like set us off, and to such a degree that we couldn't slow down. And recognizing that is going to help me slow down. Recognizing, like, okay, that thing hit me a certain way and is setting me off, and that is going to distort my perception of this relationship and make me forget about the last week or month or months or whatever of amazing stuff, and it's hitting me in such a way that I am wanting to respond with vitriol and rudeness and whatever else. So just recognizing that, giving it that label, finding the right words for the label helped me just like process it more and just think about what is happening first of all, and once I've identified what is happening, what can I do about it, or what can we do about it? So that's a scenario of just just yesterday of labeling a scenario in such a way that it just is incredibly helpful, I find. Um, like I mentioned, I was really adverse to labels for a long time because they don't mean just one thing. So if you're just what I would consider or hope to be just an average human, you would recognize that people are complex individuals and can't just fit under one box, and that one box, even if they fit into it, there's different corners of the box. The box is a certain size. They could be, there's a spectrum, right, of everything. So, and recognizing that, though, the labels help me to just start, to give me a starting point and open a door and continue to figure things out from there. And they've been incredibly helpful. I think that you have to obviously be careful if you are especially like self-diagnosing or something like that, if it's something medical, which that's why I would never say that I have general anxiety disorder. Like, no one's giving me that label, but I feel like there's no way to detach from the label of anxiety for me. One of the negative things that I've seen, so there's a lot of negativity if you give someone a label, and that's the way you perceive them, and you're not maybe, if a label is given to you about someone, like with the student example, or that person gives you a label themselves, if you do not further that discussion, that's where it's like, okay, well, that label means this, so that's what I'm going to be thinking about or feeling about them until I feel otherwise, until there's a reason not to. That's obviously not good. But if you have a label and you're thinking about that person underneath that umbrella, then you can start a discussion and get to know more about them, and that's a positive thing, right? It's only a negative thing if we stop at the label and think about people as one-dimensional and wooden, not really having any substance to them other than what we have given them as that one word or definition. But even if people are, maybe a person like me has given themselves certain labels and they feel like that can help them, I feel like there's a line you can cross there too that I've seen, and it's gross, I guess, to be really strong about it. Like, to see someone who's given themselves 20 labels, I have this, I have this, I have this, and it's almost like they're boasting about their mental health issues. Because, labels are not just about mental health. Like, I could say, maybe I'll get to that in a bit. I'm bouncing all over the place, of course. But, like, labeling yourself as an artist or something like that, which we'll get to. But someone's just labeling themselves with all these mental health issues that they've never been diagnosed with, and even if they have been diagnosed with, sometimes people just rattle these off like it's something to boast about or something that they want pity from or whatever. And so obviously you can cross lines there. I don't think, even though that person has given themselves the label or someone else has given them the label and they feel not negativity towards it, but they're just like saying it like without, I don't know how to explain it unless you've experienced it and been in someone's company who's done that. But it's just I don't think other than me just being like, that's gross behavior because what are you doing? It's just really attention seeking. I just feel like it obviously points to things that could be unhealthy within that individual if they feel the need to do that to that degree. So the other thing I was talking about was like, this isn't all just about mental health and stuff, which most of my stuff has been talking about, or emotional or whatever. But even if you just labeled yourself as an artist, I really feel like that helps people, or asking someone. Like, I don't know, it's happened before with students, but also, with other people. I've been like someone who's dabbling in creativity, or maybe they think they're dabbling, and I'm like, no, you are an artist, like. And they're like, no, I'm not. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is what you're doing. What is art to you? And then it opens up a whole thing, because I'm trying to give them the label of an artist, because I firmly believe with my definition of art that they are someone who is creating art based off of, again, what I think art is and everything else. And then it forces them to think about stuff. And so just being like, trying to tell someone, like, yeah, you are this thing, sometimes can get them to start thinking about, oh yeah, like someone applying the label of anxiety to me, right? Or some, and me applying the label of artist to someone else can get them to think about stuff, and themselves. And then if they start to believe like, oh wait, like this is what I'm doing, like I guess this is art, or they just start thinking about what art is and what art isn't, even if they say they're not an artist, at least they've thought more deliberately about why they're not. Anyway, yeah, I just think that again, for some reason, not attaching labels to me. I'm not sitting here with a whole bunch of labels. I've talked about two things in the past like 3 years that it started with anxiety and then external processor as to labeling my identity in that way. I mean, like I could label myself as an artist. I could label myself as a Canadian, and like there's all of this baggage with those things sometimes. Um, but I've just really like those things were just very natural for so long that it wasn't an issue to discuss or reflect on. But for some reason, when it started to be about mental health, I was like, this is extremely helpful. Why? Like, I just didn't, I don't know. It just, for some reason, having a starting point, having a definition with qualities underneath it that give me something to latch on to explore how I fit into it or not, just really opened doors for me. Um, Wrapping things up, I don't know how to say like, yeah, I'm pro label or not. Like, I mean, it's again a nuanced thing. It depends how you use them. It depends how people are using them on you. It depends how you feel about yourself. And I could completely understand why someone might be like, yeah, I struggle with those issues, but I'm not going to say that I have anxiety. I'm just going to like work on myself and fix those things without ever having to apply the label to myself. And that makes complete sense too. I don't think everyone needs what I need, or it didn't. I mean, whatever. It just helped immensely in that moment. Anyway, we'll see you on another time.